Brazil consistently produces high-level MMA fighters, whether that be the terrifying Alex Pereira, the grinding Glover Teixeira, or the fluid and unpredictable Anderson Silva. The country is a powerhouse in producing martial artists. In fact, across the men's and women's UFC roster, Brazil now has 114 fighters, second only to the USA. Yet the country's professional boxing prestige is fairly abysmal comparative to its size, with only 3 female and 6 male champions to note. What's gone wrong? Are they simply a nation of grapplers? Why has a country of 211 million people failed to produce more renowned pugilists? Let's examine the origins of Brazilian boxing before uncovering why many have gravitated towards mixed martial arts. Though Brazil's best known striker, Alex Pereira's boxing style is quite unorthodox. It's an aggressive counterpunching style built on clever footwork. One technique he uses is stepping his rear foot forward prior to throwing a jab. Although making him less balanced, he can creep closer to an opponent whilst disguising his next strike. When sparring against actual boxers, you notice how planted his front foot is before pushing off his back leg to generate power. His hands often remain low when not parrying, enabling him to throw punches from bamboozling angles while generating power through twisting his hips. Does this unique striking style reflect how Brazilians normally box? Not especially. Pereira seems to be a bit of an outlier, with boxers like Robson Conceição and Acelino Freitas adhering to more traditional boxing techniques, spiced up with a Brazilian beat. They maintain a wide stance, offering stability with the freedom to move fluidly, while showing dance-like footwork. The guard is often tight, but reactive, ready to launch fast counters. Yet, like Pereira, Brazil's boxers use clever angles to both attack and defend, swinging their hips to build power. Jose Aldo's boxing bouts underline the focus on effective counter-punching, whilst the legendary Eder Joffre showcased the merits of waiting for the perfect moment to strike, once the opponent found themselves thrown off balance. In my mind at least, these attributes all seem like adequate tools to take many aspiring young boxers to the top of the pyramid. Thus, it's not really the style holding them back. So what is it? Boxing came to Brazil in the late 19th century, primarily through the influence of the British military alongside European immigration. However, the local population didn't initially take to it. They preferred capoeira, a martial art combining dance, acrobatics, music and spirituality. Mario Santos's booklet from 1928 declared, "It's high time we freed ourselves from foreign sports," before noting capoeira is better than boxing that only uses arms and better than Greco-Roman wrestling based only on strength. Importantly, the hidden history of capoeira highlights the white elite's disdain for the martial art, deeming it as a slave game which did not go hand in hand with their preferred sport, which was boxing. This likely led to much of the poorer population to resent boxing, perceiving it as a vehicle to quash their own Afro-Brazilian roots. This preference for capoeira can be partly traced today, with MMA fighters like Anderson Silva, Elise Zaleski, Michael Pereira and Marcus Aurelio utilising it in the cage. So the stigma against boxing amongst much of the lower classes likely dissuaded future generations from fully committing to the sweet science alone. But of course, there's another obvious distraction from striking itself: Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. There are many Brazilian MMA practitioners who are more well versed in this specific discipline, namely the Gracie family, Charles Oliveira and Gilbert Burns. This preeminence reflects the general population's persuasion, with BJJ being the 5th most popular sport, while boxing, outside of the MMA umbrella, remains entirely omitted. But why have Brazilians swayed towards this pastime? In the book Opening Closed Guard, Robert Drysdale addresses the common misconception that BJJ has always been popular in Brazil. The BJJ boom actually took place in Brazil at more or less the same time as it did around the world, being after Royce Gracie's success in the early 1990s. But the difference was that Brazil had more black belts to teach it. From my research, there's a notion that the Gracie clan, from 1925 onwards really, made BJJ very renowned in Brazil, Brazil, possibly siphoning talent away from boxing gyms. Yet Brazilian BJJ author Marcial Serrano notes that most Brazilians had never even heard of Jiu-Jitsu at all growing up. Taekwondo, karate, kung fu and judo were all highly popular, but Jiu-Jitsu was almost an alien word to us, though he does note the limitations of geography. But again, we see no mention of boxing. It's worth noting that, throughout history, America and Britain have been largely the drivers of boxing around the globe. Britain introduced it to the US in the late 1700s, before US servicemen introduced the sport to the Philippines. Later on, American tourists would fuel boxing's interest in Cuba. Yet, Brazil was a Portuguese colony, devoid of such influence. But not entirely, perhaps. This poster from 1855, mixing English and Portuguese, announced a demonstration with glove-style striking at the Teatro El Dorado. While in 1878, the Carioca Showhouse skating rink hosted the American boxer Harry Clark, who quickly became a celebrity through challenging locals to fight for $100, therefore developing a passion for boxing within Rio. But despite initial success, the sport still fully failed to explode. Longtime Brazilian boxing fanatic Victor Violi usefully cites that Brazil has 26 states, but only in 2 would you find a handful of boxing gyms, pointing to the lack of British or American presence historically. Now, I'm inclined to agree, as the absence of a sustained influence prevented the sport from flourishing nationally. Consequently, Victor clarifies the fragmented nature, with Brazilian boxers being mainly from Sao Paulo due to heavy Italian immigration and influence, while boxing effectively disappeared from Rio in the 1970s. Interestingly, he highlights that modern boxers almost always come from Bahia, a state with an 80% African Brazilian population. I believe this can be traced back to the influence of Zeca Floriano and Jaime Martins Ferreira, 2 martial artists who promoted boxing and opened gyms across Bahia, Ceará and Pernambuco. It seems this influence is now still entrenched. My point ultimately is, boxing is niche, adopted by small pockets of Brazilian society, but not universally accepted, it seems. Yet Brazil's navy does buck this trend. Its strong boxing links starts with Goes Neto, a sailor from Rio who learned boxing on his trips to Europe around 1920, leading to its official adoption around 1930. Brazilian martial artist Oswaldo Fada details that he fell in love with boxing in the navy, while WBC super featherweight title winner Robson Donato Conceição previously signed with the Brazilian Navy to gain access to the best boxing resources. After his loss to Peter Yan, Jose Aldo turned to boxing with the Brazilian Navy also. This seems to be one of the few avenues for Brazilian boxers to fully develop and receive adequate coaching, but why hasn't it spread more widely in Brazil's society? Well, although I'm not an expert, through speaking with Brazilians, it seems that the term milical, meaning distrust of the military, is still prominent. A recent study found that 72% of Brazilians distrust the army, navy and air force, which perhaps adds to the idea that boxing is a violent pastime used to coerce and control. It's common knowledge that a nation's boxers are only often as good as their trainers. Now, Brazil has an abundance of dedicated MMA coaches, however dedicated boxing teachers are more rare, or often not as well known. Vale Tudo, meaning no holds barred, has always been a popular sport in Brazil and is basically a predecessor to MMA. According to Elton Silva and Eduardo Correa, Vale Tudo found fertile ground for its development in Brazil, where it gradually became a sport and conquered the whole of society. The sport's popularity was evident throughout the decades. The Gracie Brothers' Heroes of the Ring TV series' launch showed national demand despite it being banned for excessive violence by the government. When Vale Tudo returned to Rio in 1983, a Rickson Gracie vs Zulu matchup drew 20,000 fans to the Maracanã Stadium, with Gracie winning via choke in the second round. This provided a springing board for Vale Tudo participation, and more gyms opened up across the nation, especially in light of Ralph Gracie's emphatic Vale Tudo inspired victory against Mestre de Kung Fu in the early 1990s. As Victor rightly notes, this success has hurt boxing, particularly in the coaching sphere. The Vale Tudo based field offers more business opportunities and money. Boxing coach Santa Rosa shifted shifted to training MMA star Marco Ruas, while Claudio Coelho gained recognition for coaching fighters like Pedro Rizzo, Murilo Bustamante, Zé Mario Sperry, and Almari Bittetti. Even Luis Doria, a boxing coach who earned well working with MMA stars like the Nogueira brothers and Anderson Silva, has returned to training boxers like Robson Conceição. But the financial rewards in boxing still lag behind MMA. Simply put, the domestic money is in MMA, not boxing. So with little demand, a smaller pool of boxing talent, and coaches opting to go down the MMA route predominantly, it's quite unsurprising that Brazil's boxing program has stalled and spluttered. Brazil is a massive country with a variety of different groups, so it's unlikely that one singular sport will begin to dominate proceedings, aside from football of course. So fighters in Brazil, whether in MMA or boxing, tend to be distinctive in their style from one another. Unfortunately, against Ankalaev, Pereira struggled to cope with the hand speed of the Russian, and he just couldn't get going offensively, failing to land his signature hits from awkward angles. It will be interesting to see whether some more elite Brazilian strikers begin to grace the octagon in the years following, though they will likely look very different to Pereira in my opinion. He is simply a one-off. But now I'd like to hear what you guys have to say. What are the primary reasons that boxing has failed to take off in the country? Interestingly, in late 2024, Brazil emerged with 4 gold medals at the closing day of the World Boxing Cup in Sheffield, so there is talent in the amateur ranks. Yet this seems to fail to translate into the professional sphere. Perhaps with a lack of infrastructure and opportunities to support this budding amateur talent, they will consistently fall short, or instead opt to make it into the MMA world instead. Anyway, do let me know your thoughts down in the comments below. Please do tell me if I've missed anything. I especially want to hear from the Brazilians down in the comments below. Once again, thank you so much for watching. Please consider liking and subscribing as more content is on its way very soon. All the best. Cheers.